Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August meeting of Babergh and Mid Suffolk's Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee. There's a hammer here which I have to apparently gavel, but I've never been happy with banging things, so we'll just move straight on. Item 1 on today's agenda is apologies and substitutes. Henriette?
Good morning. Yes, we have received apologies from Councillor Scarf, and Councillor Otten is substituting for Councillor Scarf.
Okay. Item 2, declaration of interests. Councillor Muller. Could you use your microphone, please, Councillor Muller?
I'm a member of the Trustee Board for the Mid Suffolk CAB. It's a non-pecuniary interest.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I am an observer at Sudbury CA, and obviously I'm known to Colleen, who is the Chief Executive. Thank you.
Also a non-pecuniary interest, I believe. Anybody else? Councillor Ayres?
Thank you, Chairman. I also am, well, not a member, but I represent Sudbury Town Council at CAB and know them quite well, but non-pecuniary.
Okay, thank you very much, all three of you. Item 3 on the agenda is JOS 19.9. To correct the tabled paper here, it is not the meeting held on the 18th of August, but that of July. This was a joint meeting. If you have those minutes in front of you. Actually, I can't find them in front of me at the moment. Oh, here they are. This is the table one, isn't it? Yep, table paper. There's the table paper. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7. Are members satisfied that that's a true and accurate record of the minutes of those meetings? Councillor Osborne? Proposed adoption. Seconder, Councillor Muller. And all those in favour? It's passed. And then we now come to the confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of June, BOS 19/5. This being for Babergh District Council, so only Babergh members will be able to vote upon these. So BOS 19/5, page 1, page 2, page 3, and finally page 4. Okay, is every member of Babergh happy that that's a true and accurate record of the minutes? Okay, could I have a proposer from the Babergh? Councillor Ayres, seconded by Councillor Grandon. All those in favour from Babergh? Okay, item 5 on the agenda is confirmation of minutes held on the 27th of June, not July as it states on the paper, but the minutes themselves are correct. Well, that's what we're going to decide, actually. So MOS 19/5. I should ask Councillor Wellham to do this, but since I'm just here already, we'll carry on. Obviously, it'll only be Mid-Suffolk members voting upon these. Page 5 on the paper, which is page 1 of the minutes. Page 6 of the paper, which is page 2 of the minutes. Page 7, page 3, and page 8, the final page, the 4th page of those minutes. Is everybody from Mid-Suffolk satisfied that that's a true and accurate record of those minutes? Could I have a proposer from the Mid-Suffolk members? Councillor Wellham, seconded by Councillor Muller. Mid-Suffolk members in favour? And that's carried. Thank you very much, members. Item 6 is to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Have we any such petitions?
None received, Chair.
Item 7, questions by the public.
None received.
And item 8, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
All right, so we move on to the first and substantive item on the agenda, which is on the Citizens Advice Bureau's presentation. I've just realised that I completely missed out an introduction to a public meeting in the council chamber for the chairman. So keen was I to get moving on. So my apologies to you and members of the public, and thank heavens a fire didn't break out in the course of the last few minutes. Some domestic arrangements. Toilets are situated outside the meeting room opposite the stairs. Cold water is available in the breakout area outside the meeting room. If the fire alarm should sound, please leave the meeting room by following the fire exit signs and meet on the Ipswich Town football training pitch. Do not use the atrium stairs to exit the building, and do not re-enter the building until you're told it is safe to do so. If we could all switch off our mobile phones or turn them to silent, that would be great. That would be gratefully accepted. I'd just like to remind everybody present the meeting is being broadcast live on the internet. We've therefore seen what a complete mess I've made of the beginning of chairing this meeting. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this room, you're also consenting to being filmed by the council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Finally, can members and officers please ensure that you press the microphone for speaking and turn off when you've finished. So we come to item 9, which is what reminded me about this red paper I had in front of me. And I think I'd like to introduce, if I may, Colleen Sweeney, the Chief Officer for Sudbury and District Citizens Advice Bureau, and Carol Eagles, the Manager for the Citizens Advice Mid-Suffolk, based, I think, at Stowmarket, who will provide a presentation for and about the Citizens Advice Bureau. Can I hand over to you two ladies?
Thank you very much for inviting us today. I'm Carol and this is Colleen. We would welcome all of you to visit us at our respective LCAs, and also appreciate the opportunity to come to talk to your full council, as well as invite all the councillors to visit us in the communities. The right one, am I? The right one. No. I have to point it straight at it. I've got a yellow triangle.
Oh,
That one?
the right
Sorry.
button.
Sorry about that. Right, okay, so
Right, technology sorted, let's carry on.
yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so Citizens Advice. We are there to provide free, independent, confidential and impartial advice to everybody. We try to provide a holistic service where we look at all the issues that are affecting a person rather than just their presenting problem, because somebody might come to us with an issue with relationships, and that then might lead to debt, housing, domestic violence, so we deal with the whole situation. And we have very much a needs-based approach. We look at the needs of the client and then give them the support that they need to help them to deal with that problem. And we try to empower people, so we don't take the problem away from them. If we think that they have the abilities to deal with it themselves and they just need pointing in the right direction, then that's the support that we give. Or if they need extra support and encouragement, then we'll provide that on an ongoing basis. So we don't have a limit on the amount of time that people can have. If they need just one interaction, that's fine. But if they need ongoing support over a year, 2 years, 3 years, we carry on doing that for as long as it's required. So we're part of the local National Citizens Advice, but we are separate entities in our own right. And Sudbury is celebrating 50 years of service, of delivering the service this year. And in Mid-Suffolk, we've been delivering for 38 years. So between us, we've got 88 years of experience of delivering advice and support in our local communities. So we understand the needs of our communities and how best we can deliver that service. Being part of Citizens Advice also has its advantages. We're a recognised brand that people trust. We are provided with procedures and policies which allow us to be cost effective because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we are audited on an annual basis by Citizens Advice to ensure that the quality of advice is correct, that our organisations are well run, they're financially stable, and that gives us the advice quality standard. And we're also regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. So although we don't provide financial advice as such as to where to invest your money, we do provide debt and money advice. So last year, we provided help to over 6,000 people in Babergh and Mid Suffolk. And people can access help and support 5 days a week across the district. They can get advice by phone, face-to-face or email. And we understand that as a very rural community, the phone advice is key to the kind of service that we're offering, because not everybody can get into Sudbury or Stowmarket for advice. And we know the rural transport system is not brilliant in our district. So phone advice is really key. So of the contacts that we do, about 40% of them are face-to-face, and about 40% of them are people phoning up for help and support. And then about the remainder is sort of email and letter. So we do email advice as well. And then as part of one of our new services that we're offering, which is the help to claim for people claiming universal credit, we are trialling web chat. And that's quite useful for us to see whether there's a avenue for that. Sorry, it's a question?
Are your calls and visits all appointment based, or can someone, if someone might have an urgent problem, can they call you and be dealt with that day, or do you say, oh, we'll call you back in 2 days' time? How does it work, please?
If somebody phones up, then we try and deal with their problem there and then, because they may be phoning because they cannot get into Stowmarket or Sudbury or wherever we're delivering an outreach. So it's important to us that if it's an issue that we can deal with over the phone, then we will deal with it there and then. If we think it's taking longer for us to research the issue, then we will phone people back, because we recognise the fact that if you're calling from a mobile phone, that might be costing people money, so we will phone them back. And the drop-in, people can just drop in without an appointment, and in fact we offer both things. So people can drop in and get full advice there and then, but then they might come in and they've got an issue that they haven't brought their paperwork for, in which case we'll make them an appointment to come back with their paperwork so they can do that. And if we're completing benefit application forms for them for disability living allowance for children or personal independence payments or something like that, then we will arrange an appointment for them to see a person that will help them fill in that form, because that will take several hours. So wherever possible, we give them the advice we start to give them the advice straight away. Okay, so we also offer advice from outreach locations, such as GP surgeries, or we've done joint visits, for instance, to Ston & Barnes. We went together with the counsellor to Ston & Barnes. We went to Seven Sisters when there was an issue there. And so if there is an area where something is happening that needs a little bit of support, then we will do that as well. So advice issues. When I started doing this role 10 years ago, debt was by far our biggest issue. And then debt and benefits were sort of side by side, and now benefits far outweigh debt. And the universal credit is obviously the new benefit for people in work and looking for work. But we are still getting the same demand for help and support with the legacy benefits. By legacy benefits, I mean employment support allowance and personal independence payments, so more of the sickness benefits. And we've got a particular issue at the moment that we are getting a lot of people being migrated from the old benefit disability living allowance to personal independence payments, and they have the DWP have really pushed through the numbers, and that has been quite difficult for us and the LCAs across the county to manage that demand. So we've had to put extra hours and support in to be able to deliver that. And then the results that we're getting from those applications, quite often they're not quite where we would expect them to be and the clients would want them to be. So we're then having to ask the decisions to be looked at again and the appeals. So it's not just the initial application, it has an impact all the way through. And so, which is why some people need lots of ongoing help with each stage of the process. Employment, housing and relationships and family, they're our next issue, biggest issues. And as I said earlier, if you get a relationship situation, the chances are you are going to get housing, possibly debt and benefits, all part of that need. Okay, so the bulk of our service is delivered by volunteers, and our volunteers, we've worked out using a formula developed by Citizens Advice that between Babergh and Mid Suffolk, our volunteers, if we paid them the normal going rate, we would have to pay over £657,000. So we'd have to triple our income if we paid all our volunteers to deliver the service for us. And that service is supported by the equivalent of 9.7 full-time paid staff. And most of that, the paid staff, time is spent on supervising and managing the volunteers, because volunteers need training, they need support, they need encouragement, and the quality of their work checked. So where a client needs extra help in benefits, as I was saying just now, or they need help with their money advice, they need bankruptcy advice or debt relief orders, or we have somebody with employment issues, then we will support people with appeals, and we will help represent them at tribunals, and that is done by our specialists. And our trustee boards, they are selected from the local community, and they are all volunteers. And all our volunteers are locally based, wanting to help our local communities and give back. Okay, so we work with partners. We try to have a collaborative approach. So we do referrals to the food bank. We're one of the food bank's referral agencies. And we use a whole host of food banks across the 2 districts. And we can also access charitable support. So that charitable support could be for a washing machine or to get a cooker repaired. It could be, in the past, we've got grants for twins that were going to college and needed Astro boots each because they were doing a sports course. We've had grants for debt relief order fees, or a huge range of hairdressing equipment, you name it, we've managed to get grants for it. And we also work with other providers. So we work with Shelter for housing advice. We'd work with Age UK, Suffolk Family Carers, lots of other local charities and national charities. And one of our most important partners are the councils, Babergh and Mid Suffolk District Council. And we work closely with the housing team, so where we will go and look at people that are about to be made homeless and support them with their work. We will also do joint visits where benefits are concerned and clients need support with benefits but they can't come to the Bureau. And we've also, as I said earlier, we've done joint visits to Stonham Barnes. So we see the council as one of our key partners. And then in addition to our core services, we also have project funding for specific projects. So National Citizens Advice has got Pension Wise, which is advice for people that are nearing retirement and are considering what to do with their pensions. And we have services, we have those appointments delivered in our local LCAs. And last year, Sudbury had 147 of those appointments, and in Mid-Suffolk we had 137. We also provide energy advice, and that could be supporting people to swap their energy suppliers, or energy saving, you know, loft insulation, things like that, or grants to fix boilers. And between us, we dealt with over 200 clients last year. And then we both have family law clinics where Bates Wells and Braithwaite come in and deliver. And in Sudbury, you've got quite a few solicitors that will go in and provide a free half hours to clients that have got matrimonial issues, you know, access to children, divorce, and that. And then in Mid-Suffolk, we have a project specifically for families affected by multiple sclerosis, where we give support to mainly benefit form filling for families affected by MS. And then in Babergh, Sudbury and District are just about to start the social prescribing, the Health to Connect, in partnership with Suffolk Family Carers, and they will be delivering support in Bilderston and Hadley surgeries. So that's a bit of a whirlwind from me, but the last thing I wanted to mention was the paving slabs, which are probably familiar to you from your strategic plan. So we've picked out the 3 paving slabs that we think are key to the work that we deliver, because when we develop our own business plans, it is important for us to help you to deliver your strategic priorities, and in fact the County Council's strategic priorities as well. So the 3 that we've picked out are housing, because we feel that we support the councils with their homeless prevention strategy. The top 3 priorities for housing being the prevention of homelessness, supporting vulnerable households to secure and maintain accommodation, and mitigating against the impact of welfare reforms. So by providing income maximisation and helping people through their benefits, and helping people with their rent arrears, you know, not paying their rent arrears obviously, but freeing up their income and increasing their income, and looking at their outgoings, we can make people more able to pay their council tax and their rent, whether they be housing council house tenants or social or private tenants. And then the asset side, we deal with neighbourhood disputes and help people to move to more suitable accommodation, because there may be debts on a property that's preventing them moving, and we will help them to resolve those issues. And then from the strong and healthy communities, there may be a reason why people are not engaging with their community, and that could be lack of money, and that could be because they're not getting all the benefits that they're entitled to, and they cannot afford to go to the WI because they can't afford to make the donation for their cup of tea, or they can't afford to go to Knit and Natter because they can't afford to buy the wool, or good quality incontinence pads, or there could be a whole host of issues which is keeping somebody in their home and not engaging in their local community. And so by providing them with holistic advice and managing their issues that are affecting their health and well-being, we can release them space to go out and engage in a local community. Okay, that's my bit. Thank you.
Okay. So there's a fair bit about what we do, so should we have a look at the results? In the past year, we assisted clients in gaining welfare benefits of 1.4 million in mid-Suffolk and 230,000 in Sudbury and District. We managed debt at 1.3 million in mid-Suffolk and £701,000 in Sudbury. I'm sure it's of interest to you to know that after credit card and mail order debts, the highest amounts owed were for council tax debt and housing benefit overpayments, both in 1718 and 1819. Many of the people who we help to claim welfare benefits are disabled and therefore at risk in terms of their vulnerability. By helping these people to get a secure income, we enable this underrepresented group to be active in their communities. Our work contributes towards the county-wide anti-poverty strategy to improve financial inclusion in the districts. We directly support those residents who may find themselves in financial difficulties. Our debt management work with clients includes interventions that have been shown to work. We offer free and impartial debt advice. We can help people to access appropriate debt solutions as a route into debt relief. We increase the uptake of means-tested in and out of work benefits. We also improve the financial knowledge and skills of people who need our help so that they are better equipped to manage their income. So our work with people in debt is also preventative and helps people to sustain a good financial position in the longer term. National Citizens Advice use a model that is approved by the Treasury to nail down the figures for the financial impact that we have. These figures are local to Citizens Advice in Suffolk and are produced by the team at National Citizens Advice who work on the model. So, for every £1 invested in the Citizens Advice Service in Suffolk, national government and local authorities save £3.52. For every £1 invested in the Citizens Advice Service, we generated £20.84 in wider economic and social benefits for society. So looking at Suffolk as a whole, this meant that we saved the national and local government £8.1 million and we generated wider social and economic benefits of £48.1 million. To be honest, nobody comes to volunteer with Citizens Advice because they want to save national and local government money. We're here because we know that people face problems and think that they should have good advice to help them deal with those problems. At the same time, these figures can show a helpful way of communicating the impact of that support on the wider community. We help councils to deliver their statutory duties. If we can step in and stop a person's problems from escalating, then they don't end up homeless. They don't default on their council tax. They can stay in work. They don't get into rent arrears. We have a regular client survey that is sent out after an appointment to ask clients for their feedback. This is administered by National Citizens Advice and is standard practice across the Citizens Advice network. The survey is sent by text message or email, and these are the results. The results are very similar across both LCAs. 77% of our clients said that the service had helped them to find a way forward, whilst 94% said they would recommend our service. It's our focus on quality advice that has led to these results, and we're really committed to keeping the focus on quality advice going forward. Research and campaigns used to be known as social policy. It's a side of our work that isn't so well recognised, but is equally as important on a local and national scale. There are some problems that we are beyond our ability to solve, to be honest, and this is where our research and campaigning comes in. No one else sees so many people with so many different kinds of problems, and that gives us a unique insight into the challenges that people face today. We collect and monitor evidence on the problems that people face, and we use that evidence to campaign for change. And some examples of where we have are universal credit, bailiff protocol, private renters' rights, energy bastille, payday loans, scam awareness, and welfare reforms. This is another example of how we seek to prevent problems in the first place. So what are the challenges? In September, we are celebrating 80 years of citizens' advice nationally. The service was first established at the start of World War II to help people to adapt to the challenges they faced. We are locally funded independent charities. We do not receive core funding from National Citizens Advice. It's thanks to the support of our local funders that we are able to offer our service. Our main funders are Babergh and Mid Suffolk District Councils. So thank you to all of you for your support. When Suffolk County Council announced that they were going to halve and then withdraw their funding, the local clinical commissioning group used some of their contingency funds to make up half of the funding that we received from the County Council. We are very grateful to hear that they will provide half of the amount of funding again in 2020 and 21. We have worked hard to diversify our funding in recent years, and we are fortunate to have the support of a range of local charitable trusts and community groups. For example, Stowmarket Relief Trust, the Ganzoni Trust, the Alfred Williams and Geoffrey Burton Trusts. Some of our funders provide money for specific projects which cannot be used for core funding, such as the Multiple Sclerosis Society, who fund a worker to give dedicated support to people with MS. The outlook generally is that it is very challenging to secure sources of funding that are sustainable. There simply aren't many options for us to fund the core running costs of keeping our offices open. And at the same time, we're seeing an increased demand for our services. The introduction of universal credit has been the biggest change in the benefit system since its introduction. And although we have a project to help people making new claims, it can be a complicated benefit to claim, and we do anticipate that people will still need advice in the claiming process. In addition, our populations are ageing, and more people are experiencing frailty and loneliness. We expect to see an increased need for advice from the elderly people in our districts. Another factor that has increased demand is the reduction in voluntary sector provision generally. For example, the closure of Optua and Age UK Suffolk ceasing to offer advice. We have become the main organisations for the completion of benefit forms, along with all else we do. One of the things that makes us anxious is that the average level of household debt is at pretty much the same level that our debt clients owe. So any economic shocks, such as an increase in interest rates, could well lead to an increase in demand for our money advice services. Excuse me. Another challenge we face are national trends that have made it more difficult for us to recruit volunteers, such as the increase in the retirement age and the increase in mothers in paid employment. Locally, we've heard some rumours around the future of citizens' advice across Suffolk, and although we have tried carefully to get the message across about the impact of how the withdrawal of the County Council's funds has had a challenge on recruiting volunteers, it seems that there are expectations that the loss of the County Council funds will render all of some of the Suffolk LCAs as unsustainable, and this could have put people off from joining us. This isn't, in fact, a reality. We will feel the pain, but have, through careful strategic planning, been able to diversify our services to find ways to weather the storm. Having said that, for Mid-Suffolk and Babergh LCAs, we are now even more reliant on the funding that we have from our district councils. Our core funds ensure that we can attract funds from other sources, but there is a limit to what we can bring in as project work without saturating our capacity by taking time and resources away from the delivery of the crucial work that we do in our general advice services. We aim high to deliver the service that we aspire to, and for that reason would ask you all to consider very carefully that it is so important for us to plan our future strategy in line with our 3-year business plans. Thank you all for inviting us and taking an interest. I do hope that we have been able to give you a good insight into the services of both LCAs, but please do ask any questions that the presentation's left unanswered.
Can I just thank you both, Carol and Colleen, for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I think the slogan at the end there, "For everyone for 80 years," is a rather proud boast that many organisations will be very pleased to be able to make. I'd like a point of clarification on one thing that, Colleen, you said towards the end of the presentation, that the Clinical Care Commission Board are going to provide half the funding that they have done this year.
That's
in
right.
1920. Now, as I recall, Suffolk County Council withdrew. We're going to supply half last year, or this current
That's
year,
right.
and reducing to nothing.
In 2021.
In this case, would the Clinical Care Commissioning Board be taking on the position that Suffolk County Council were prepared to do last year? In other words, will you only get half the money you would have got, and that you're getting this year? So there is a shortfall there.
Yeah, so very fortunate to have half in the pot for 2021 from the CCG. Talks are still ongoing with the County Council, so we're not feeling that it's all's lost yet. We're still, you know, harbouring hopes that they'll see the good sense in continuing, and with the support of the CCG, will have halved their bill. So, yeah, but that was really good news. That's given us a lot of reassurance, and we hope to work with the CCG well into the future.
It would be worth knowing, letting the committee know exactly how much that is, the amount of money that you will lose, or Suffolk CABs will lose.
For Sudbury Citizens Advice, it's around about, without having the exact figure in my head, it's around about £25,000, half of the County Council's funds, or just under.
I was going to say that there are some figures contained in a couple of infographics that were supplied to members of the committee, but not everybody will necessarily.
And we do have copies
those.
of the last signed off accounts, 17-18, if anyone would like a copy for both.
Okay, I'd like to
LCAs.
throw this open to members' questions on, for both Carol and Colleen. Councillor Grandon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we all very much value the work that the Citizens Advice does. You've talked about the need for funding. I presume your funding goes towards rental of offices and so on, but your volunteers, could you explain how the funding is used, what kind of thing you need the money for, if you're mostly volunteers, please?
We have travel expenses, which we cover. Obviously, we're obligated to ensure that no volunteer is out of pocket by coming and giving their time to us. We also cover extensive training. So they're managed, they're supervised by paid staff. They're heavily supervised, as Carol explained earlier. It's part of the way the service works. The training's ongoing because of the nature of the advice that they give. There's always changes in regulations, legislation. They need to be updated constantly about new benefits that have come in. So there's always CPD training going on, which we have to either provide ourselves at a cost of a training officer or usually, and that's outside of our local offices, so we pay quite large amounts for any training courses that people go on. We tried to cover things like team meetings, away days, events where, because a lot of our people, well, all of our people, they mainly come in on 1 day a week, the advisors, or most of the people, whichever role they advise in, they don't tend to see each other through the week. So we tried to, people come for two reasons. They come because they're usually people who've had very large background careers and want to give something back, and also for the social contact with like-minded people who also want to give something back. But it's nice to be able to provide the odd social or training event as a large group, in which case we have to provide, catering, venue costs. So there's all sorts of expenses really. But I suppose one of the biggest ones would be the supervision and the management of them.
Thank you.
Councillor Otten.
Okay. I don't think I need to declare an interest being a county councillor. No.
I can't see any particular reason why you should, Councillor Otten,
okay.
really. It's not something you need to sound guilty over.
Zoe, obviously, I was obviously present when obviously a lot of this information came forward. So my questions would be, one of the arguments was that given that the level of reserves that the CABs had, and obviously we would like to hear from you why we felt that that wasn't a cogent argument. And the other thing is, obviously, we were delighted, and I'm sure everyone here was, that there was this last-minute reprieve. But obviously, it would be interesting to know at what stage Suffolk CABs had a conversation with the districts and the county council in order to be able to have avoided that crisis. The other thing is, I know that a lot of problems come about particular scams, etc. And how much do you work with trading standards? Because I know they're very active in certainly particular telephone scams where people have lost a lot of money. And just finally, I just wonder how many single men now come to you, because I know that's always been a major problem, in that they are always the very bottom of the list of being able to be allocated any social housing.
Sorry. There's quite a few questions there, so I've probably forgotten the first one. So I'll work my way backwards. With regards to the number of single men, we do see a lot of single men, and in particular homeless men, and men that have got issues with drug and alcohol. But I don't have those statistics with me today, so I can give you specific, actual statistics. I can get those run off for you. And we do track ages and sex. The bulk of our clients are female, but I will get those for you. With regards to trading standards, we work very closely with trading standards, and there's one particular, there's quite a few situations I could cite, but there's one elderly client of ours who was continually buying things on by phone calls, constantly being phoned up, being asked to buy stuff. And because she was lonely and vulnerable, she spoke to them, and then she invited them round and allowed them to come into her house, and they would talk to her for several hours until eventually she said yes. So every time we did a home visit there, we noticed that there was more and more new things being put in place, and didn't really twig until we were asked to go there and complete some forms for pension credit. And when we were completing the pension credit form, she said, "Oh, but that doesn't include the £8,000 I've just spent on the radiator and the water purification box." So basically she had purchased this water purification box to clean water to go into a radiator, and another one, a panel to warm up the water, so she would never have to heat her water again. And so at one of our county meetings, I spoke to Trading Standards, and the name of the company that had provided those pieces of equipment were under investigation by Trading Standards. And using her evidence and our evidence and some other people that had been affected, a successful prosecution was taken of that particular company. And Trading Standards then made her cul-de-sac a no cold calling zone, and fitted the True Call phone system so that she could actually monitor her phone calls coming in, and also put a sticker on the front door, which she still had somebody come, but then when they saw the Trading Standards sticker on the front door, he actually hurried out again quickly. And now, because she has had a talk from one of the Trading Standard officers, she's a little bit more aware. She still makes mistakes, and she still phones us up and says, I think I've got a problem, and then we deal with it and get the money back for her. So that's one example of where we've worked closely with Trading Standards. And then we've had another client who was having some gardening work done, and the bill went up and up and up, and to a situation where there was intimidation going on. And again, we did a joint visit with Trading Standards and called the police. So we also do scam awareness prevention in the LCAs. We've got posters up, and the banks are quite good at referring people to us as well. So yeah, there is a close working relationship between us and Trading Standards. With regard to our reserves, we do all have reserves because we are all companies and charities, and so we have a duty to make sure that we are financially stable. And for some funders, they look at how stable we are and they expect us to have reserves, because they would not be comfortable giving us grants and project funding if they thought that we weren't going to be here tomorrow. So we do need reserves in order to ensure that we are sustainable. But practically, you can't keep setting deficit budgets and eating into your reserves, because sooner or later the reserves won't be there anymore. So for us, we feel it is prudent to have reserves, just as Suffolk County Council and the district councils and any other organisation should have savings.
Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. Really, this is directed obviously at Carol. Being a member of the trustee board, I'm fully aware of the increased amount of work that the local branch has to do. There's been a lot in the media regarding help for parents with school children during school holidays with referrals to food banks. What sort of increase in referrals have you noticed this summer having to refer to the local food bank?
I probably should know the answer to that, but I don't know the answer to that. That's probably one of those ones where I'm going to come back and let you know. We have seen a definite increase in footfall during the summer holidays, and we are very conscious of the fact that once children, can no longer have their school dinners, that's when life gets more expensive and everything gets a little bit more fraught at home.
And then it starts with uniforms to go back to school.
Which again is where we have helped in the past accessing school uniform costs.
Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. Three completely separate questions. One is I'm sometimes told, I won't go to CAB because there's a waiting list. If you could dispel that, I'd be grateful. Do you have any drop-in sessions in the evenings for people or on Saturdays for people who are in work? And then comparing your impact between the two, and I guess it's different across the whole country. In the case of Babergh, we gained 230k in income for our clients, and that figure's 1.4 in mid-Suffolk. And managing debt, the two figures are quite different.
Okay. Can I answer that one, please? Sorry.
And one other question, then you've got the whole lot. You're on the edge of you're on the edge of Suffolk. Presumably you have clients from places like Twinstead and just across the border. Do you get funding from Essex? Thank you.
Starting with the Essex question, there is a bit of a difficult problem going on, as far as I know, by the local Essex LCAs and their district councils. I don't think they're taking much of an interest in their own LCAs. But having said that, we do, there's a cross-border situation that goes on with all LCA. Some may come from Essex, usually Colchester or Braintree area to us, but then equally people may go across the border and see them rather than us. So it's sort of swings and roundabouts, if you like. That goes on all over the geography of it. With regards to the debt, lower debt levels, we have been without a debt specialist for a short while because we've not had somebody in post that would be able to do the casework. So it's dropped our figures a bit in that period of time. We're hoping to resolve that in the very near future. We did have a project with Babergh that I actually relinquished because I felt that we weren't in a position to deliver it in the way that we'd usually aspire to. So asked them to come to an end with that funded project until I was in a better position to deliver it how I feel it should be delivered. So that has kept our numbers down a little bit. And the other question was about the waiting time, if you'd like to.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so you asked about the drop-in, and people can drop in and be seen, and we do record our waiting times, how long people have to wait for advice, and normally it is only sort of 5-10 minutes before they're seen. In very rare cases it might be an hour if we've got a switch over in shifts at lunchtime, if one team's finishing and the other team haven't quite arrived for the day. We do a late night opening till 6:30 in the evening, so we can accommodate people that need to come after work. And so we've sort of addressed that issue. We've looked at doing Saturdays, and in the past most of the LCAs have opened on a Saturday morning. But one of the challenges with opening on a Saturday morning is that nobody else is open on a Saturday morning. So if there are issues with council tax debt or housing debt or any, you can't, DWP, you can't get hold of anybody. And so there's not an awful lot you can do. We do try and open between Christmas and New Year because we recognise the fact that, I mean, this year Christmas is Wednesday, I think, Wednesday, isn't it? So I think we will be open on the Friday and possibly the Monday as well. And we talk to the food bank, and the food bank normally organise us some food parcels and will do deliveries for us because we know that as Dave was saying earlier, you haven't got the school dinners, you've got extra visitors and everything else. So we're open between Christmas and New Year. We're open till 6:30. And then one of the stats that I had that I didn't give you earlier, Citizens Advice has got its own advice and information system. I don't know whether anybody of you have ever looked at it. In the old days, people would come in and say to us, what is my holiday entitlement and things like that. Well, we all Google everything nowadays, don't we? If you want to know who's married to who or whatever, you just look it up. And last year, in 1819, there were 41,000 visits in Babergh to the Citizens Advice website, and there were 45,000 visits from Mid-Suffolk to the Citizens Advice website. So people can access some form of advice from Citizens Advice 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that can start to help them resolving their problems. Is that right?
Thank you. Councillor Caston.
Hi, yeah, I'd like to thank you very much for the work you do. It's absolutely crucial and fantastic. My question is sort of, maybe personally, you were talking about the people that can't afford the cup of tea when they go to they go to social groups and things like that. There are a lot of people in Suffolk that don't ask for help. It's kind of with the older generation, They steer clear of anyone that's offering them help. There's disabled people that have been in the same house for years that will never go to you or go to anyone else for help. They just keep going, and maybe a tweak to the benefits or help filling out a form might solve a lot of those problems. Personally, what do you think we can do altogether? Because obviously the CAB deals with people coming in through the door, but how do we reach out to those people and deal with those issues?
We do work very closely with other partners in the hope of finding those people, and we do try to give as many access options as possible, as Carol's explained, through email, telephone. We provide home visits where necessary. A good example of a situation that you've just described was just a week or two ago. We're now working in a GP surgery in Hadley, and need to be careful, I'm not giving too much description, but one of the GPs rang me to ask would we be able to provide a home visit to a patient that he was very, very concerned about for all sorts of reasons, who didn't really access services. And the whole problem, one of the problems, the root of the problem was that this chap needed so much help in so many ways, but wasn't reaching out anywhere. And we were able to send an advisor, and the first conversation was on, obviously the client gave consent for the GP to give us the details, and the client consented to one of our advisors visiting, and the first interview or discussion was on the chap's doorstep, but it's going on from there, and it's been a great relief to the GP, who's been at the end of his wits to know what to do with this patient, because there was just nowhere that he could send them, and they weren't willing really to make that step. But between the joined up services that we're now working in, with the surgeries, and it can be with counsellors, it can be with MPs, it's with all sorts of partners, it's with each other, that we can reach out and find these people. Because obviously a lot of the Babergh district that I cover is very rural. So it is, you're very right, the point you've made is a very good point. It's something we really do need to keep hammering away at. And this is why we also have outreaches where possible, isn't it?
And we've had referrals from the fire service as well when they've gone out and done sort of smoke alarm fitting and things like that. We had a referral into the benefits service for that. But we try to promote the service as widely as we can with press releases. Hopefully we may be in the newspapers this month or this week for volunteers, looking out for volunteers and just promoting the service as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, we work hard on promotion.
Right, I think at this point I'd like to come back, if I may, to come towards the question of funding, which has been a central point of our reason to bring the subject up, as well as the service provided. Now, I have some questions from Councillor Scarf, who's unable to be here today. It may in part have been answered, but please bear with me. He asks, are there substantial different types of funders, particularly outside bodies such as charities, trusts, etc.? He believes that could be useful to know. And in that case, are they on a service level type arrangement? And if so, how many years will those be in place? Because obviously that could have future funding impacts. So that's the first point, and then I've got something to follow on with. But for that.
All our funding is provided on an annual basis. So the funding from Suffolk County Council was an annual, and you know, it was announced in sort of November that we might not get it from April. Our funding from the district councils is always done on an annual basis, and quite often we don't know about that until April, May, June. And we do have, at Mid Suffolk, we have one project that is funded, and we sort of get a 3-year agreement for that. But most of the stuff is on a year-by-year basis, which makes it really, really hard. Because although we have got the reserves, at what point do you start really cutting back? Because when you're looking at the service that we deliver, which we operate for 5 days a week, and we are busy for 5 days a week, if you are looking to reduce the service, or you've got a funnel effect, you're just going to make it even busier on the days that you are open. But we do look at all the trusts. We use Suffolk Foundation, Community Foundation, who hold a lot of the local stuff. And we apply for whatever we can. Citizens Advice will do national schemes like the Help to Claim, which we're delivering at the moment for Universal Credit, but that is only till the end of March, so we don't even know whether we'll have that next year.
So effectively, yes, but it's on a year-by-year basis. Now, that must make budgeting rather difficult. So we come back to the central point, which is the overall funding. Now, you mentioned earlier, I think, Carol, that you had some figures for this current financial year.
We've got the annual reports for 17-18. We haven't published.
Would it be possible to supply those towards the committee to our governance support
the
officer?
17-18?
Yes, if that's
yeah,
possible,
I've got copies
and have them added to our deliberations and to our report. I think that would be useful. It can be circulated amongst all the members of the committee for our considering how we take this forward. So thank you both for everything you've provided. We also have both cabinet members from the respective two councils, Babergh and Mid-Suffolk, Derek Davis and Julie Blackman. I apologise, Julie. It's a list of names here. I'm trying to remember who's who now. I believe you've been discussing with officers the impacts that the service provided by CAB has on council services. After all, we are the major funders of these two respective citizens' advice bureaus. Would you like to introduce those points and then perhaps take some questions?
Well, firstly, thank you, Carol and Colleen. I spent a really, really good morning with Carol not so many weeks ago, and their work for us is invaluable. It really is. I mean, they're the first stop, and if they're not funded by us, I see, big problems with housing, with homelessness, with debt. So I think they just do a fantastic job, and we saw it in action while we were there. What they haven't said also is, they do deal with perhaps some quite violent people as well, so they need training on how to deal with those situations. At the moment, we fund Mid-Suffolk CAB to the tune of 86,700. Okay, and also Keith mentioned about cross-border. We also fund Disson District, £8,810. Now, if you think about the vast spread of Mid-Suffolk, you've got people up towards Diss, as Pelgrave, Gislingham, Laxfield, those sort of places, Stradbroke. So obviously those people will go to Diss. That's why we fund those as well. That was the question that came up with Essex. So, and I know as a cabinet member, we have talked about the prospect of us saying exactly what we're going to fund you for 3 years at a time, which would help you. So we have brought that up, and actually I thought we agreed to that, as I said to you the other day. So I will be bringing that forward at the next meeting of what, if we can actually put that, pen to paper and say we definitely will do that, which would help you. The other thing is, obviously, you have been in discussion with how you could countrywide get together and perhaps come up with some sort of business plan. But I know a lot of you work, in your own areas rather than a joined up approach. But is that something that you'd be thinking about at all?
We're working very closely with why we still need to remain independent to some extent. So we look at joint working and promotional opportunities together. We have what we call an alliance, and we use an action plan that we're all putting together at the moment to try and better the position of us as a whole across the county. But there are lots of reasons why we need to remain independent. Some of those reasons, I've probably got a note on here because we thought this question might come up. You may all realise from what we've been telling you today that Carol and I have very busy jobs. We're both operational and strategic managers in our independent LCAs. Sometimes you have one person doing each job, but we do both. We're head cook and bottle washer, if you like. That job's becoming busier and busier because we've lost funding. We're having to diversify. We're having to bring project money in. We're having to manage those projects. We have to monitor and report on those projects. We've also seen an increase in the general demand, as we've explained today. In Sudbury, we've seen a 28% increase in demand on our general advice. So looking at it that way, what you've got to really think about there, there have been comparisons made. Both LCAs have looked at whether there are any costs to be saved by any sort of merger, and we found there weren't any. There was much more negative than positive stuff. It has been looked at. The main one being, of course, it would be the chief officer or manager's role that would be the one to go and share that role. And basically that wouldn't work because they're larger organisations. I have currently something in the region of 60 volunteers to manage apart from paid staff. Carol's is not dissimilar. All those people need that sort of management. We've got paid supervisors, but they need you there on most days a week. So all we'd be doing by cutting the cost of cutting staff and restructuring that situation would be putting another tier of management in. So we'd have 2 operational managers in each site with some form of CEO or chief officer having to head those on the strategic side. Our volunteers, they want to work in their own local communities. They certainly don't want to travel for the sort of distances that you're talking about between Stowmarket and Sudbury Town Centre or our sort of district regions. There's the expenses of paying for them to travel if they chose to. Training would be almost impossible to deliver across both sites in the current situation I have with my training officer and Carol, how she manages hers. We've only got 9.7 full-time staff, full-time equivalent staff between us. So any sort of restructuring, there's very little room for movement there. So the answer to that is I'm really glad to put this to rest, to be honest, because it's an obvious, that's just a simple thing to do, but there's actually no benefit in that. And probably from what we've seen from other mergers, there have had to been several restructures due to financial losses.
And the budgets don't seem that substantial in the first place, so what gains could be fairly minimal. Councillor Davis, do you have anything you want to add about the services provided to councils?
Yeah, sure. I'll try not to repeat too much that's already been said. And so I'll mainly focus on Babergh, but it's absolutely vital that we support the CAs, without a shadow of doubt. In terms of figures, someone asked for something earlier on, but Babergh contribute 53,500 towards a revenue cost. This is from the year to March 2020, and has funded Sudbury CA for a number of years. We also put towards Ipswich CA a total of 7,673 for the year. So again, it's that cross-border working. And it has to be said, without the support of the CA, Babergh residents would really suffer. We as a communities team go out and do an awful lot in terms of health and well-being, community safety and everything like that. But the CAs are pretty much the first point of contact. And I'd also like to mention a point, I think it was Councillor Otten that mentioned earlier on about trade and standards. I recently had an occasion for a group of my residents to contact Trade and Standards and found that I had to go through the CA, so I had to go through citizen advice. So if Suffolk County Council are going to cut the funding, they're cutting the funding towards Trade and Standards because that's where the budget comes from, Trade and Standards. So they're basically getting the advice and the work, that first-hand sort of help from CA. They're getting that for nothing because they're not contributing towards it. And of course, they're clearly expecting the district councils and other authorities, the CCG, to fund everything that's going on. Well, you know, when they're making cuts in lots of other areas, and I understand that they have financial restraints as well, but when they're making cuts to the bus services, to social care, you know, it's the districts that have to pick it up. So while we would love to be able to give the CAs even more money, you know, we physically can't, because we've got our own budgets as well, and we're finding we're having to pick up more and more of what the Suffolk County Council are cutting. It's clearly a difficult situation, and I'm really glad for the explanation about not being able to merge. I think that's really useful, because it's an obvious thing to suggest that, you know, we all do this, don't we? Let's just merge it and save money. It doesn't always work, and I'm really happy that you proved. We do need to work smarter. We do need to find ways ahead, but you know, I cannot emphasise enough how important work that these guys do, and I want to thank them from all of my Babergh residents.
Okay, members, I'd like to invite you to take any questions you have to the two Cabinet members on that matter of the services that CA provide towards supporting our own services. Councillor Otten.
I'm not clear, so maybe you could clarify how you intend to proceed as part of your budgets and in conjunction with the Suffolk County Council, so quite frankly we don't end up with a crisis situation like we had last time. So really, I mean, I think it's a case of, I'm assuming you will all be working together to try and resolve the problems that the CABs have faced.
Councillor Davis, if you'd like to answer that. I've also got a comment I would just add before we go any further, that that's part of the purpose, Councillor Otten, of this scrutiny function is to avoid exactly the situation you're describing, to avoid a crisis by the time budgets are reached at the end of this year. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you. And it is exactly that. We do need to find a solution. We need to be as creative as we possibly can be. You know, but I, in the first instance, I would urge Suffolk County Council to rethink their decision, and I'm glad to hear that this talk's still going on, because that's at least a straw to grasp at. For us, Councillor Flatman mentioned, we do intend to help with the budgeting to have a 3-year revenue grants funding, not just for the CA, but on a widespread basis, because we understand, you know, this year-on-year, hand-to-mouth sort of existence is not great. So that's something that certainly Babergh is doing, and I believe Mid-Suffolk as well. We're doing that jointly. So we are working towards that. And I'll be really grateful that Scrutiny explores all this and we can work together. And obviously the CCG obviously plays a big part in this as well. And we need to encourage other funders. One of the big issues, again, there's a definite correlation between the cuts from central government, the cuts from Suffolk County Council, to the rise in issues that the CA have and lots of other groups have. And of course, that's also placed a huge strain on volunteers, because there's less funding in paid for organisations, if you like. More and more volunteers are required across all different sectors, across the community, which makes it's a very competitive business getting volunteers. And we've seen Community Action Suffolk putting out pleas and going for people. But, you know, it tends to be the same people, if you like, doing the same ones. And there's only so many hours in a day that you can do that. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, yes, we are looking at that. But hopefully this scrutiny process will help in that.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any questions from members? Right, well, thank you very much. I think we're getting to the stage now where we can... Councillor Mabry, did you have something you would like to say?
Thank you, Chairman, for indulging me. There are just two comments that I would like to make. One, I think it was Colleen talking about professional people coming to work at CAB. I can absolutely endorse that. Having friends who have retired from professional places and that they are coming to you. And really, it's been, when you become a district councillor, it's surprising how friends come to you and say, what can I do? So what I'm trying to say to you is that perhaps you need to engage more with ward members to see what connections they have. So that's the first point. The second point I'd like to make is that for 2 years I maintained the grant to you, and looking at your figures, it actually works out at £20 a head, and I don't think that's bad value. No, it is. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mabry. Okay, members, I think the question now for debate and discussion amongst ourselves is, where do we go forward from here? And I think that's very much up to you. So before we actually come to forming any resolutions, I'd just like to hear members' thoughts on what we've heard today and what possible directions we could go in. Over to you, members. Councillor Osborne.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'd tend to agree with Colleen and Carol. We need to actually carry on with lobbying Suffolk County Council, as they're the biggest provider of any funds that we can do. So from that point of view, I would like to see that taken on board. Carry on.
Thank you very much. Councillor Otten, then Councillor Aston and Muller.
Well, I think my comment earlier was exactly that. I mean, I think we need to now start negotiations with everyone concerned.
Fine, agreed. Councillor Muller and Councillor Caston.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, personally, I think we should be maintaining the funding to the CAB, both in Stowmarket and in Sudbury. There'll be an awful lot of people would suffer if that money was stopped, because where else would they go if we didn't have the dedicated staff that both Carol and Colleen have? So I think we definitely must support that. They provide very good value for money, and we do not want to see vulnerable people with nowhere to go.
Councillor Caston.
Yes, totally agree. I'm surprised at the county's decision. It seems to me like this is kind of a time bomb. If we reduce funding into this, we're going to eventually end up in a position where we definitely don't have the resources to deal with the problems that we've got. So yeah, I would totally agree with Councillor Osborne and a lot of other members that we do need to commit to this funding, which I hear we are in the process of doing. And in my opinion, I think maybe we even need to increase the funding, because the more they do, the more people they reach out to, the less as the district council will have to deal with, and it's very expensive for us to deal with it. The CAB seem to get amazing value for money for what they do, and yeah, that's how I feel about it.
I can see cabinet members' heads swivelling as you suggest that. Okay, any other thoughts, members? Councillor Wellham and then Councillor Ayres.
Talking to Councillor Osborne.
Councillor Osborne,
Who's
sorry?
trying to get your attention.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Osborne, other Councillor Osborne, my apologies. Your head was swivelling as well, I take it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, as the Cabinet Member for Housing, I very much appreciate the part that our CAB play in delivering a service to assist our housing team. It's key that they continue to this, and I can see that if funding is reduced, then some of that will impact enormously on our residents in Babergh and obviously in Mid-Suffolk. So I would absolutely hope that this committee would say that they will continue to lobby Suffolk County Council. I have to say, I've done it in the past when we knew what they were intending to do, and I think it fell on deaf ears. So I am hopeful that with a lot of support and a lot of commitment to pushing this forward with county, that they will not take away that funding, that valuable funding that the CAB need. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In fact, I do recall when this committee were examining universal credit and its rollout, that the impact on our housing services team was quite notable, and the support of the citizens' advice was one of the things that was just about enabling them to stay above the, I think it was the virtual quadrupling of a workload in certain areas, and we've already heard reference in the presentation on universal credit. Right, I think I was expecting something from Councillor Wellham and Councillor Ayres. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. normally our role when we are sort of in scrutiny is scrutinising our own services. We look in great depth at those services and hope that something will come out of that so that those who are within that service have found a better way forward. I think that in this case we've heard a lot from the two people who made the presentation, and I, along with others, are very grateful for the work that you've done and for the way that you presented it today. I think what we can do, one positive thing we can do, is to ensure that there is publicity of our scrutinising this service so that that publicity can be used to urge others to grant fund.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ayres? Don't think you're on.
I would like to endorse everything everyone else has said, and particularly over the publicity, as Councillor Maybury said, to publicise the fact that we need professional people to volunteer. So we really do need, and thank you again for all that you do, because I know from Sudbury how much you do. Thank you very much.
Well, let's hope the large numbers of people watching us on YouTube or on catch-up will take that on board, because after all, this is about being transparent, being open, and if it also increases communication and understanding, it can do no harm in the process. Now, I think we have to come to some form of recommendation or some sort of resolution for the committee, otherwise we've been wasting our time. And we want to actually achieve positive action. We're looking to improve things, basically gain benefit and add value. So I've got some suggestions. I'd like to hear what members think about this. First thing I would say is that as the two individual councils that this joint scrutiny committee should suggest that both councils, the cabinets, maintain at the minimum maintain the current level of funding for citizens' advice as a minimum, and what's more, we should consider 3-year planning for those budgets, as has been suggested by Councillor Flatman. Second suggestion would be the purpose of this whole process, because we've been working on this, as you can remember from the June meeting. We were discussing a joint scrutiny. But joint scrutiny is what we do, Babergh and Mid Suffolk working together as two separate sovereign councils. And one of the principles of scrutiny is that it does not have to be inward-looking, it can be outward-looking, in this case outward towards the whole of Suffolk. And the suggestion always was, from this whole idea, that we use the powers of scrutiny to approach all the other constituent authorities in Suffolk, that is both East, West, Ipswich Borough and of course Suffolk County Council. And the scrutiny committees of those councils, the relevant one for Suffolk perhaps, should be approached with some view to forming a joint scrutiny process across all of those councils to work together to seek solutions, to see if there's a possible way of making that process more open, more transparent, bearing in mind there's a certain amount of time. So it's not just a matter of lobbying or trying to say to Suffolk, do this. We can actually talk to all the councils and see if we can actually add value across the whole of the county, rather than taking a narrow viewpoint that it's only one council's responsibility. So that's the general way I'm thinking. What do members think of that? Councillor Haddingham.
I'm very happy with your first suggestion that we recommend to the Cabinet that we, at a minimum, keep up with our what we're giving now and possibly look at a 3-year, budget sort of thing. And I'm happy to propose that.
So we have at least some idea on one. What about the second idea? The second idea, Councillor Caston and Muller. Caston first. Yes, Councillor Caston. Proposal or the? On the first proposal. Yeah, but fine. I think we've got one recommendation. I think we want to form. Yeah, it's fine. We want to form all the recommendations, but we obviously have some agreement amongst ourselves that the first recommendation for continuation 3-year plans. Councillors Davis and Flatman.
We just want to make it clear that the 3 year is already in place.
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay, the recommendation be that continued funding, okay, and I think that should provide some of the publicity as a minimum. That's fine, I don't think it does any harm, even though that's what you were thinking of anyway. Can't be doing any harm.
Not thinking of,
it's
already done.
In place, it's already done.
Okay, fine. Does the point do any harm? No. Councillor Caston. that the joint scrutiny process be undertaken. Or at least we should. Now, here's the point. We can't make anybody do this. We can contact those other councils, and we have made some preliminary contacts already through officers. We are waiting. This report will be the report we will send, if this is your agreement. What we've done today is combined together with any figures we have, any facts we have, the infographics sheets, and our own deliberations will form the basis of a report to go to the other scrutiny committees for them to examine and take up if they wish. And if, thank you very much, Councillor Otten. So we have a proposer and seconder for that one. This needs to be worded, but do you have the general idea? Councillor Ayres, everybody's nodding. It has been discussed heavily in the chairs' meetings. Councillor Wellham and Councillor Ayres can probably testify to that. And it's dependent upon those councils wishing to take part, but why would they not? It's something of a no-brainer, in my opinion, that we should talk about these issues before they become a serious situation. Let's not make a drama out of a crisis. Let's deal with it before it even becomes a crisis. So fine, we have the first proposal is the recommendation that continued funding on a basis of 3 years as a minimum. We have a proposer and a seconder for joint scrutiny. All those in favour? So that one is passed as a recommendation. Recommendation 2, that a joint scrutiny process be approached with the other constituent Suffolk councils, and subject obviously to their interest. Proposed and seconded already. Those in favour? Fine. We might have to word that up appropriately, but I hope members will trust that Henriette has that properly in hand. Are there any further recommendations? Councillor Wellham.
Chair, do we wish to go anywhere with the suggestion from Councillor Maybury that perhaps we join with the CAs to give some sort of joint publicity or help them in some way towards raising the profile to get volunteers in, and perhaps also that might help spread the word to other potential funders, like parish councils take some account of what district councils do, and if the district council scrutiny committee have looked at the CA and said it's fit for purpose and want to recommend it, then I think parish councils might want to go along. Now, how we word that as a recommendation, I don't really know. Or perhaps we just refer to it and we put it in our chairs' reports to councils.
One thought that occurs to me, and I know Councillor Maybury's aching to get in here, because I can see her leaping up and down, is that, I mean, many of us have got experience in parish and town councils, and we all know that it's difficult enough to get parish and town councillors. However, a joint members briefing to councillors would then feed back to those parish councils. I mean, that we are part of that communication link. I don't know, Councillor Maybury, if there's any thoughts on that?
Thank you very much for indulging me again, Chairman. It's just the point that we had a big publicity force that said we are the leaders of our communities and we should be showing that. And I was just trying to explain that you have friends who you know what they do, but once you become a district councillor, you suddenly have more friends for whatever reason, and a lot of them are from the professions. One I can think of in particular is a barrister who actually comes to you and they say, what can we do to help? And my general idea, if they don't have perhaps an avenue or pathway that they're particularly interested in, is to go to the citizens' advice where they have a broad outlook and where there are lots of issues that are raised daily. And that's what I was trying to get across. I think we can perhaps influence parish councils because, again, those perhaps who are on a parish council have, I'm going to suggest, a real interest in their community, and they also may be able to give a few hours to the citizens' advice, or they know a family member who can. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne, you wanted to add something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to go back on this funding process, I have obviously been with the Sudbury CA for a considerable amount of meetings. And one of the issues that does come out is the funding they get from other parishes. They have tried lots of areas to get the funding where Sudbury has had included those parishioners from those parishes. So I would say the advertising side of things in terms to try to get this extra funding from, I know they've got small precepts and are unfortunately not able to give quite enough, but some of their residents do apply. I'll take it at Stowmarket as well, and to Sudbury. So the advertising factor, I think, is a big must, and obviously to keep. And I've got to say this again, with Colleen and Carol actually working on the side of getting the funding continuing with Suffolk County Council, I think that should be kept up as a high profile as well. Thank you.
I think I'm coming to the conclusion from everything that people are saying is that we're all concerned that the lessons learnt and the publicity element is what we're really talking about, whether that be in order to gain volunteers, whether it be in order to gain funding, getting the information out there, which is part of the job of Scrutiny. We're there to provide information, to throw light onto things and spread the word. Whether it be through, here's my point, the mechanism to adopt for publicity. And it's all very well for us to say these things should be done, but unless we actually have a clear idea of what mechanism we will use, there are how many parish councils that are currently being consulted over the joint local plan? 70, 80 across Babergh and Mid-Suffolk? And we all know that there are parish councils and town councils, they have different sizes, budgets, and numbers of members. We also know of many parish councils that will maybe have they have to co-op members from time to time. We know that it's not as simple as doing a catch-all. Perhaps that publicity process could be part of the joint scrutiny approach, and also the fact that we've had this meeting, we have to hope that this will achieve some attention across the county, in the press and in public through Facebook. Do we need a resolution on the matter of publicity, is the question. And how would you name such, and how would you phrase such a resolution? Councillor Otten.
Chairman, I would have thought that the minutes of your meeting will explicit and report your report.
I think that's probably the case, that the attention we've given is at some length today is sufficient to start the ball rolling, but then we should be looking to take this forward with that some form of joint scrutiny process. Should that not emerge, there is no reason why this committee cannot continue to work with those partners who do show willing, regardless. I think that would be the approach that I would take, and I think Keith, the other chair, would agree with me there. So thanks very much, members, for that. Thank you for all the speakers and witnesses, and thank you for the length of time you've given to this, and for other contributions as well, Councillor Maybury. Break just to get some things settled. Next item would be item 10, JOS 19/10, 5-year housing land supply update. This will include the Babergh 5-year housing land supply annual position statement and also that for Mid-Suffolk. We have both cabinet members present for Babergh District Council, Clive Arthey, and for Mid-Suffolk District Council, David Burns. Thank you both councillors. And for officer representation, Philip Isbell, Chief Planning Officer, Robert Hobbs, I believe, was going to be here but doesn't appear to be. He'll be here shortly. Robert Hobbs, Corporate Manager for Strategic Planning, Stephen Stroud, the Strategic Projects and Delivery Manager, and Matt Deakin, Senior Policy Strategy Planner. If you gentlemen would like to find yourself a place where you can hear and be heard. Anywhere suits you, frankly. I mean, you know, we're not going to stand on any ceremony. I could ask if members want a short recess, if there's any reason for that. Shall we say a 5-minute recess? Is that sufficient time to get coffees and other things? Thank you very much. Members are all assembled. I think it's only, yep, Councillor Ayres is here, so we're all back together again. We'll resume with the agenda. We were up to item 10, JOS 1910, 5-year housing land supply and update, the Babergh and Mid-Suffolk annual position statements, with Cabinet members for planning, Councillors Arthey and Burns, respectively, for the two councils, who are present here. Sorry, I've lost you, gentlemen. We also have Philip Isbell, Chief Planning Officer, Robert Hobbs, Corporate Manager for Strategic Planning, Stephen Stroud, the Strategic Projects and Delivery Manager, and Matt Deacon, the Senior Policy Strategy Planner, to address this paper. I'll hand over to, would you, Cabinet members, like to introduce the paper?
I can if I can work it. Yeah, it's a little bit difficult because, of course, you're a joint meeting, and we've got both David and myself here. The principles for both are the same, except, of course, that at the moment, Babergh have not been able to have in excess of 5-year housing land supply, and Mid-Suffolk have. I thought this was quite simple for you this morning, and basically we'd just highlight page 11, paragraph 1414 for Babergh, and paragraph 415 for Mid-Suffolk. As I'm sure you're aware, we are required to identify our housing land supply, and you've looked at this in the past, and of course your concern is the periods during which we don't have more than 5 years housing land supply. So what we've done is that we've produced draft annual position statements, which I'm sure you're aware of. They've gone out to consultation, and the end date for that consultation was Friday of last week. Those draft position statements identify, as you can see, a housing land supply for Babergh of 5.78 years, and for Mid-Suffolk 5.61 years. The one for Babergh includes a 5% buffer. I wasn't going to go into any great detail, and if you have any detailed questions, I was going to refer them to the raft of experts that we have lined up here. The only thing that I was going to add is that this is not an ideal situation for us to be in, as I'm sure you're aware, and one of the main reasons for the difficult situation that we're in is because neither council has an up-to-date local plan. So I would just stress to you the importance of the joint local plan, which currently is out to consultation. Of course, that has to come back, consultations considered before we come up with a submission draft. But I would just stress to you the importance of getting through that process as quickly as we can, because we do need an adopted, up-to-date local plan as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burns, anything to add?
Yes, thank you. Unless I'm corrected otherwise, the reason why we need a joint local plan, adopted plan, is because until that time, whatever housing land supply figure we manage to confirm is continually open to challenge. At the point we have a joint local plan, an adopted local plan, we will be able to we will be able to confirm a 5-year housing land supply, and once we've got that figure, it will stick for the year. Is that reasonably accurate or not? Yes.
Right, well, I think in that case, let's hand over to the officers and they can present the report, and hopefully they'll answer all those questions and any others that members may have. Rob, are you starting this one? Or is it Phil?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So what we set out in the report, as Councillor Arthey and Councillor Byrne have alluded to is effectively we've produced an annual position statement for both Babergh and for Mid Suffolk, which is required by the National Planning Policy Framework and also with the planning practice guidance. And this, the change from last year's National Planning Policy Framework, in particular around outline planning permissions, where we now have to enter into statements of common ground effectively with those promoters of those sites to ensure that we have a robust 5-year land supply position statement. So when it comes under scrutiny at a public inquiry, for example, we've got the evidence there that ensures that it's robust, and also that we've gone through a consultation period of 4 weeks to again ensure that we get feedback from the development sector as to are the assumptions in the 5-year land supply position statement accurate. And we've now got some responses back from the consultation, and we'll go through those with a view to producing these 5-year land supply position statements shortly. And as Councillor Arfi and Councillor Byrne have alluded to, we've got a position of 5.78 years for Babergh and 5.61 years for Mid Suffolk. I'm happy to take any questions anyone has on the report.
Councillor Wellham.
Chair, I was quite surprised to hear Councillor Byrne say, perhaps I'm putting not quite the right words into his mouth, but more or less along the lines of the 5-year land supply position statement is of little value without a current local plan. Now, I thought it would have a significant value without a local plan, perhaps not, or obviously not the same sort of weight. So can I have a comment on that? Can I also have a comment on the timescale for considering feedback from developers and us having a firm position statement?
Yes, if I can just clarify that point, what Councillor Byrne was referring to was that if you have an up-to-date local plan, you can have your 5-year land supply position statement effectively agreed by the planning inspectorate, and then it's fixed for 12 months. So therefore, it can't be challenged at public inquiry. But where we are at the moment is we still have the 5-year land supply position. It just means that public inquiry that will be open to scrutiny but every time. That's effectively what Councillor Byrne was alluding to. In terms of getting a formal position adopted, obviously we will work through the consultation responses as quickly as we can, and I anticipate that we should be in a position shortly to be able to produce the new 5-year land supply positions. Yeah.
Any other members? Questions? Councillor Otten.
At 4.4, is calculated by comparing the anticipated supply of new homes within the district. I'm just not clear at the moment because there has been in the past some, if you like, discussion about how the council does actually calculate the number of new homes projected. So could I just have it clarified exactly how the councils do that?
Rob, are your button not
yeah,
working?
That's right. Yeah, it's working now. Sorry, apologies. So the question is about how we anticipate the supply. So we've got a large number of planning permissions within the district, and so what we look at is of that supply, what can realistically be deliverable within the 5-year period. So are they? So that comes back to the engagement with the developers, particularly around outline permission. Are they intending to build out within the 5 years? And we also look at what the market conditions are and build out rates as detailed in the position statement to understand when they likely can come forward. So for example, if you had a site for say 500 dwellings, it's unlikely that all 500 would come forward within the 5 years. However, an element of it, say 250 dwellings could come forward if the build-out rate was followed by that developer. Where a site has full planning permission, the general assumption is that those sites would come forward, and that's set out in national guidance.
Certainly, Councillor Robin.
Is there any kind of, do you have any kind of leeway? Because obviously a lot of that will be subject to, if you like, financial and, you know, the current or prospective financial position, economic position, not just of the council, but of the country. Are you able to sort of factor that in?
You can do.
If I can pick that up, the key point is that the process of agreeing statements of common ground with developers should flush that out and get them to confirm that their delivery rates or their expected timetable is credible. I mean, to a degree, because this is speculative, I guess, in the state of the economy in the long term, one has to rely upon the market to give you accurate information, but that information can then be relied upon by ourselves. So to that degree, one would believe that the information they give us is credible based on their best guess on their own financial calculations about delivery and their financing arrangements.
I mean, if I could just interject here, that as I understood it, and I could be wrong, but the paper we have in front of us is basically a very simple summary of some aspects of the housing position, the housing land supply position statement that is currently out for consultation. Now, the methodology in there and the memoranda of understanding existing within each of those two council areas do describe the sort of amount of rigour that has gone into the process. I, for example, know that there's a memorandum of understanding for a large area within my own ward for 288 houses, and the delivery plan for that has been assessed at so much here, so much then, and so much then. So, I mean, from that point of view, we don't necessarily have the time to go through the rather lengthy number of pages there are. I've got the document up at the moment, but it doesn't seem to want to tell me how many pages there are. Let me have a look. 46, including a housing trajectory, which is, I suppose, going upwards. If it's on a trajectory, it usually implies upwards. So there's a lot of technical detail, and the question is, we're not really here to discuss the technical detail. We're just here to discuss the fact that this is where we believe we are, and this will be capable of doing what we want it to do, which is to be one half of the equation. Joint local plan is one half, 5-year land supply is the other half. When you've got both, you have a more robust position which you can defend a planning position in apply your own local policies as opposed to the NPPF. Is that a fair summary?
I think it's a fair summary. If for clarity, having gone through this process and adopted a final position statement will certainly enable us to argue that the weight to be attached to any of those arguments around the absence of a local plan can be mitigated by the fact that we do have a land supply which is in excess of 5 years, so we can take comfort from that. We won't necessarily completely avoid some of those arguments, but in terms of the case we make at appeal, it's a much stronger hand to proceed from.
Councillor Wenham.
Thank you, Chair. I understand the position now as regards having a 5-year land supply position statement which is agreed and a joint local plan. Surely if there is a 5-year land supply position statement and a current neighbourhood plan, that particular parish should be in a stronger position than one without a neighbourhood plan. And can the two be read together?
Yes, you're correct. In the neighbour plan is part of, if it's a made neighbour plan, it's part of the development plan. And to go further than that, if the neighbour plan allocates sites, even if the council was to have a 3-year land supply, the neighbour plan policy still hold full weight. Yeah.
That answer your question, Councillor Whelan? I have some questions sent in from another member, Councillor Hinton, was looking at recent news reports concerning the costs for legal advice to local councils, and he had concerns that the legal costs for this might have been as excessive as has been reported. I'm not convinced that it's necessarily the same case, but is there any cost? I can notice the financial implications do show an approximate cost and so much per site without actually giving a total figure, and I think the total figure might be interesting. But the legal costs of carrying this process out, I appreciate it's a necessary process, but have we got any sort of ballpark figure?
Aside from our own internal legal advice from Shared Legal Service, no, we have not sought external legal advice on this. Obviously, our application of the information in this has played into appeals, but they are appeal costs rather than a cost associated with this, so I can't lay hands on those as we speak today.
Fine, thank you very much. I think that hopefully answers those questions. If Councillor Hinton is watching this later on, he will probably be able to hear it, but I'll send him an email in the meantime. Any other questions from members? Councillor Harthy.
Yeah, just really to reinforce what Councillor Byrne said with regard to the fact that these position statements can be challenged. I think what I would say is that in the period that we're in, up until the local plan, this is the best that we can do. So, yes, we may be in a position of challenge, and it may be that Councillor Hinton's question that he emailed through to you was about what the cost implications might be of having to defend our position at public inquiry. But I think the simple thing to say to you is that at this moment in time, we have done the very best we can do. The consultation ended last week. Those consultations are being considered, those responses, and I'm hoping that within just a matter of weeks we will be able to actually confirm the position statement. That's the best that we can do in the situation that we're in.
As I recall, again from the past, this committee did examine the very process of the 5-year land supply and the methodology, and we asked for a better explanation. Councillor Hinton amongst those councillors at that time making the suggestion that we have a more robust method, a more transparent method. This one, I have to say, seems to me to be pretty exhaustive and answers that question perhaps rather more than anybody might have wished. Councillor Grandon.
Thank you, Chair. So something I don't quite understand. When the joint local plan is published, this figure might have moved by then with changes, or might it have moved by then with changes in figures that we hear from developers and so on. So if it's better or worse, does that then link with, sorry, have I got things completely wrong? Because you were saying that it can be challenged while we don't have a joint local plan, but when we've got the joint local plan, that the figure is confirmed. If the figure changes one way or another when the joint local plan is ready, you know,
As I understand it, your question is that does this figure not
only
hold on for a whole year
yes.
until we've got a joint local
yes.
plan?
Yes.
I mean, it does have value within itself, does it not? That's the first question. And the second question is, does its value change when we actually adopt a joint local plan? Is that the fair summary?
More or less, yes, thank you.
So the process is that once you have a joint local plan or local plan that's adopted, then the following 1st of April, you notify the government that you wish to submit your annual position statement to be considered by the planning inspectorate to be fixed for a year, and then you have to submit that by the 31st of July. But because we don't have an up-to-date local plan, we can't go through that process. So in essence, we still produce an annual statement in line with the government guidance, but it can be challenged through public inquiry if a developer chooses to do so.
Councillor Byrne, you look as though you wish to clarify this.
Well, I just wanted to say that just because it is open to challenge, if we believe that we've done our work correctly, and then we believe we would be robust enough to withstand that challenge.
Defend it.
And that, therefore, the figure that we say we've got at the moment could well hold all the way through until we have a joint local plan, because it will always succeed at challenge, at any time that it's challenged.
And as I understand it, the memoranda of understanding are absolutely prime piece of evidence that we actually have discussed this and have engaged with the developers, the people who actually deliver the houses.
Yes, I mean, from our perspective, the statements of common ground with developers are arguable and beyond question from a point of view of evidence in a public inquiry somewhere. Building on that, then, you end up with a position statement as you have it. I mean, clearly, this provides, and I think Councillor Grander's question about the future and a future change in this state, it might well feed into the consideration of JLP and housing targets if delivery rates are different, and that becomes a point which somebody might wish to use as part of their case in adjusting our housing targets or looking at what we deliver in the JLP. But based on what we have, I think our perspective is that the JLP is credibly founded, and that this is a sound piece of information that feeds into that. The future, obviously, we can only predict so far.
Members, I'm conscious we've spent some fair time on this. If I refer to paragraph 3.1, the recommendations, we are being asked to note the contents of this report and the draft Babergh and Mid-Suffolk 5-year housing land supply annual position statements, which have been subject to consultation. And I think it's important to note, I think for members' concerns, this is less of a public consultation and more of a professional consultation, that it's important that it be carried out, but it's as important that the professionals, the developers, the land agents and a variety of other people involved in this industry, if you want to call it that, have had the opportunity to look at our 5-year housing land statement. So do I have a proposer for the recommendation 3.1? Councillor Haddingham. Seconder, Councillor Muller. Any other proposals or any other considerations? All right, all those in favour of the motion? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much to all officers. Sorry for keeping you so long whilst we gassed away. Now come to item 11 on the agenda, which is an information bulletin, JOS 1911. And this information bulletin is an update on the voids times in council housing. It was to be attended by Councillor Osborne, who's had to go off to a cabinet meeting, which I believe many other members. We're only 8 minutes after schedule that I hope to finish by. I apologise for keeping you waiting. This item is an information bulletin on a voids performance. Heather Sparrow, the corporate manager, Housing Solutions, and her team have been working on this for years. 2 years this project has gone on. It has been something of a success. From a position of 78 days void time for at least one of the councils, if not both, we are now down to the figures you see before you. In Babergh, a full year, April 2018 to March 2019, of 21 days for standard void relet time, and for Mid-Suffolk 25. The first quarter of this year shows those figures dropping even further to 13 respectively and 18 from 78. This is below the targets that we set, and this has been a steady process. I think the report speaks for itself. We've been receiving updates on this report initially every 3 months. No, initially every month, I believe, actually, at the worst period, and then 3 months, and then 6, and now yearly. Any comments on the report, first of all, or the information bulletin? Councillor Haddingham.
Just really to say it's an absolute success story, and I think it's fantastic. You know, I remember sort of ranting back in Needham Market about the state of it, and it's great, and let's hope it continues.
I note also the void costs per property seems to be under control as well. It looks like a lot, but in fact, there's a total voids cost of 100,000 for each council, just 110,000 for each council, which, when you consider what repairs and the number of voids involved, which is between 40 and 50 for each council, it's incredibly good value. And a lot of this work is now being carried out, or has been carried out by Babergh and Mid-Suffolk BMBS building services, our own building services, hopefully at better use of public money. Because using outside contractors has had to be done at one stage, proved to be expensive. Now, hopefully that was a one-off cost. So the question is, we have a bulletin marked down, the next bulletin on this subject, as being November 2019. The question really is that, is there any particular need for such a bulletin, Councillor Wellham?
Chair, I don't think there is a need, because we will be able to pick up from other sources the way this is going. I would like to propose that we thank the officers for the work that they've done in achieving, not just achieving the target, but bettering the target, and that we do not need any further reports back unless they feel it would be helpful to them, or that the target is no longer able to be met. I don't think we need to hear back from them every time they miss a target for a month. But if there is a reason why there is a target being consistently not met, and we can help with it, then I think we need them to report back.
Well, further to that, and I will come to Councillor Haddingham, is that I note a large-scale audit of the voids process from end to end will commence in September, with the findings in October. That process is already going to be underway. Does Scrutiny need to be involved? Councillor Haddingham.
I was just going to say, maybe if we have an information bulletin, maybe say once a year, just to keep a vague eye on it. I think if we sort of throw it out of our, watch list, might be a bit of a mistake, but that's my thinking.
The possibility exists of an annual one. Members' thoughts? I think, there's two ways of going. One, we could ask for a report in the case of an exceptional circumstance, which would cover the same purpose as an annual statement. I mean, an annual statement automatically just, was something that should be monitored anyway. I don't know. Members' thoughts? Councillor Wellham.
Chair, the performance management statistics will show us more regularly than that whether or not the target is being met. We will be able to pick them up there, and if we feel that there is a need, then we can call for an information bulletin. I don't think there's a need for one.
That is an excellent point, actually, Councillor Wellham, because the quarterly performance management statistics that come to Cabinet will show the voids. Voids is one of the key indicators, so it is highlighted already. I attend Cabinet meetings at Babergh, I'm sure you do at Mid-Suffolk, so there is already a tracking process in place for this. I'm just thinking we're duplicating. And I appreciate your concern, but hopefully it's unnecessary. So we thank the entire housing team. Councillor Osborne is also... Councillor Osborne, you want to address that as well?
Yes, I tend to agree with Councillor Wellham there. However, my main concern, looking at costs of voids, putting them back into action, we need to know that we're actually getting that sum of monies down with either objectives to actually entice good tenants to actually look after their properties, because when they do move out, they do tend to have a lot more work to be done onto some of those properties that they, if you excuse me saying, but tend to, in a way, trash that property.
I mean, I think the question really is that whether we believe the housing team have got that in hand already. I mean, the figures here on the voids costs do seem to show that the vast majority of the costs are under 1,000 or 1 to 3,000. And as you go higher and higher up, very, very few of them are the ones that seem to indicate a trashing. Councillor Wellham.
Chair, I don't think it's necessarily trashing, because I know a number of people who have been in the same council property for many years, and when offered new kitchen units or whatever, new central heating systems, they've said, no, I'm quite happy with what I've got. I don't need a new toilet, I don't need a new bathroom, I don't need a new kitchen unit. And so it's bound to be like a £10,000 job plus every time somebody who's been, I've got a relative who's been in the same council property for in excess of 50 years, and apart from doing their own decorating, they've had nothing done because they haven't wanted it doing. So I don't think it's trashy.
It's probably a bad word to use, trash. I didn't mean it in that context, because basically what's happened within an area that I know well is that you do get tenants that tend to do a lot of work unbeknown to the council, and then consequently when they have the option of moving, they leave that with works which should not have been performed by, if you like, DIY enthusiasts. So I'm not, please don't get me wrong, I don't mean the word trash as such, but it tends to mean a lot more work for our MBS services when they find that there's been work carried out which they should not have undertaken.
Yeah, point made. I mean, I think there's one aspect of that we can take some comfort in, is that the new housing tenancy agreements, paralleling the private sector, make that a little less likely. And the figures here do seem, this is admittedly only for 1 quarter of this year, but they do show a very clear trend towards the lower end of the scale. So we have a proposal that we need no further report. Do we have a seconder for that? Do we have a counter proposal for requiring one for a year's time? No. So those in favour of the proposal was Councillor Wellham, seconder was Councillor Muller. Those in favour? But we want to make sure our thanks are added to the housing team in all departments involved in the Voids project throughout the course of the last 2 years. I think that's an important point to make. As you say, it's been a success. It has involved a lot of people. Okay, item, I'm assuming 13. No, 12, forthcoming decisions list. My apologies. We briefly touched on this in discussion in our pre-meeting. Describes the forthcoming key exempt and other executive decisions to be made by the Cabinet and Council in the course of this council year. Any thoughts or comments on the forthcoming decisions list? Councillor Wellham.
Chair, I don't think there's anything there that we're not already addressing. Nothing new there that we need to put onto a work plan.
Fine, in that case we move straight on to item 13, which is, I trust, our Babergh's Overview and Scrutiny Work Plan and Mid-Suffolk's Overview and Scrutiny Work Plan 14. So 13, the Babergh Overview and Scrutiny Work Plan, which will be very closely paralleled by the Mid-Suffolk one. You will note that quite a number of the forthcoming months have been filled in with items to take us through September and October and into November. We have something arranged now for every month bar April next year, and these things have been known to move around as reports may not be available or circumstances may change, or of course individual items may come up, be called in, and so on. Any thoughts, any questions on any of the items on the Babergh or the Mid-Suffolk plan? Councillor Wellham.
Chair, can I just ask whether members, when we've got 1 or 2 items, very few items that are solely for one council or the other, when we have those, would members rather have, if it is possible, the separate section, in the case of Mid-Suffolk, it would be possibly the Needham Lake scrutiny, on the same day, but at a later time during that day? Or would you rather, members, and the same would apply for Babergh items, would you rather come back on a different day?
I mean, it occurs to me, that there are increasingly few items that are exclusively a matter for one council or the other. And it's become apparent in the course of this year that more often than not we are meeting as a joint committee. And actually I have no problem with that, because actually I think it's a better committee. With only 6 members on each committee, a pool of 12 gives us a much wider range of viewpoints and experience, and I think that's useful in itself. So I would be happy, whatever happens, if there was an item for either Babergh or Mid Suffolk, it'd go at the end of the agenda.
Yes, Chair, I was suggesting that if you have a single item on that agenda for that same month, maybe we can have it at the end so that the opposite council leaves, and then the existing council then committee then carry on. We can have a short recess, hopefully. We have got the rooms booked longer than our meetings normally take, so hopefully that we should be able to accommodate that. It would possibly pose a little bit of a problem if we had to start setting up other meetings later on in the day for the room issue. So, but I'll see what I can organise.
A continuation process would be more sensible. After all, we've dealt with 2 sets of agendas, minutes today, no difficulty with that. It happens in joint audit, it happens all the time. And there's no point in duplicating officer effort. And we've saved council time and money in that process. And I think that's something we're all here to do. Right, in that case, if that is item 14, as I say, the agenda, the work plan is filling out. Councillor Otten.
I'm on page 25. Is that okay?
Yes, this is items identified for review but not currently timetabled.
Yeah. You've got one there, community transport services. Is that purely the service run by community transport? Because I think it would be useful to expand that into, because I think that is a bit of a big issue at the moment.
Agreed.
Transport issues for people living. I notice you've got their lining. Is that main lining? I hope not.
But that would be under the Police and Crime Commissioner. Sorry, I know what you mean, the crime prevention one. This item is identified for the Mid Suffolk Committee, not so much for the Babergh Committee. Okay. Councillor Grandin?
No, I suggest that we've been hit with problems from the county cuts. Yeah. So I would quite like to broaden the scope of that one and perhaps bring it forward, unless it's something that you've already covered on a previous date.
Well, I mean, I'd like to recall what the thinking was. Councillor Wellham, this came from the Mid Suffolk suggestion. I know it's been looked at in the past. That has actually sat on the topics identified for review for quite some time.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've envisaged this really to be not really a look at the specific services that are currently provided, but a wider issue of more access to services for people who live in rural areas. So it may be taking the services out to them, or being able to come into, say, in our case, Stowmarket or Stradbroke. But I haven't really got my head around, this is my fault really, I haven't really got my head around how broad or how narrow it could be, because it could be quite narrow and only look at a service that the county council is providing, however well or badly, or it could be such a wide review that we might be looking at too much and never get anywhere. So
I have a feeling it's a large subject. Councillor Grandin, do you have any points on this?
Thank you. I don't know, having been new to this committee, I don't know how long that's been sitting on. But I think in between, things have changed around us, which now makes this topic quite important to scrutinise. But not just the accessibility, that's one part of it. I think we need to really look at the whole community transport service issue in much more depth now that there's likely or are being a lot of great cuts.
I will take a point from Councillor Maybury at the back there.
Thank you again. I was just going to jump in there. One of my parishes is going to be severely affected by cuts in community transport. The link that perhaps Councillor Wellham is actually looking for is the issue of rural poverty, which is a hidden poverty, but it is very clear. And lack of transport links actually manifolds itself into this rural poverty, which makes living in rural areas so much more expensive.
All right, I'm aware that there are two issues here, and I think they're often confused because there is public transport and then there is community transport. And I'm also aware, having looked into this in the past as a ward member and been involved in the withdrawal of the buzzabout service that used to apply on the Shotley Peninsula and has disappeared completely, that this is almost entirely in the control of the county council, that the influence and interest and the budgets concerned of district councils do not really figure within this area, okay? So the question is if we were to scrutinise it, to what end? Could say we were punching above our weight, if I'm honest about it. And I think it's dangerous to try and take on something that, frankly, you are going to be told it's none of your business. And I don't mean that with that lack of respect. I mean that, you know, there is a role for the district council, there's a role for county council. We do not get involved in social services, for example. That's not our function. We do take a part in it, though. Councillor Otten.
I'm sorry, but I misunderstood the role of scrutiny. My understanding is, I know I'm not on it, but my understanding is that you can scrutinise anything that affects the residents of your district, including things like Anglian water or, you know, which you have no...
Councillor Caston, I will come back to that. Councillor Caston.
Yeah, I do agree with Councillor Otten that it's a very serious issue and we've got a lot of problems. But yeah, I can't really see our position on it. I think the only way we could scrutinise it was if we were thinking of somehow providing some sort of service as a district council, which I think would be a very dangerous road to go down because it's not our job. But for the district council to scrutinise the county council, I can't really see where that would go to, whether that would be considered or whether that would just be seen as not any of our business.
If I could return to the point I was going to make, is that when we were talking about scrutinising citizens' advice, we are contributors to the citizens' advice. We do have a direct stake, and in fact we are the principal contributors to that. Whereas public transport is almost completely under the control of the county council, and in fact the funding of it is as well, and this applies to public services as well. The bus services that are going to shortly potentially be withdrawn because they're apparently being underused because they don't take note of the people who use free cards and things like that. We would be not just pushing at a closed door, we'd be pushing at a door where it's literally been bolted because they've already had studies on these to say that they are not going to fund them. We can protest, but would we be superseding the role of the scrutiny committees on Suffolk County Council? And that, I fear, is where we might come a cropper, if I'm quite frank about it. Councillor Wellham.
Chair, I think we do have a duty to the people who live in our two districts in terms of their health and well-being by not being able to get anywhere. And whether that be by community transport or by whatever means, I think that there is something here that we should be looking into. And I've heard it said that it's to do with, you know, the extra cost of living in the community. There are people who can afford to get from one place to another. They don't drive a car, and I just think that there is something there that we ought to be looking at and we can help with. My problem has been for the last 12 months I haven't been able to get my head around exactly what it is to define the issue that I think we need to scrutinise. I think Councillor Otten has helped along the thinking of what it might be.
I think that's the point. We need to define what it is we mean and what specific area of public transport. It's a big area and a lot of money. We need to define what we're scrutinising.
I'm not sure it's public. I'm not sure it's public transport. There's a lot of voluntary organisations I mean, just myself as a Stow Upland good neighbour, part of the role of our good neighbours team is to take people, it might be from Stow Upland to the dentist, to a hospital in Ipswich, or it might just be down to the railway station so they can go off to London to see a relative. It is just the fact that there are people out in our villages who, even though they can afford to move themselves.
Okay, look, Councillor Wellham, I think the key here, and I think this is something that we'll have to continue discussing, but the difficulty is I would like some suggestions from members, quite seriously suggestions, and I'm sure Keith would feel the same way. How do you define the terms? What particular aspects of it, and also what resources are available for us to find out? But we need to have, before we can add value, we must first define exactly what we are examining, and I don't think we've yet achieved that. I mean, I've heard several different versions of the same thing, and I believe I've maybe talked about something different from what you've talked about, and I'm pretty sure each one of us has a different meaning about this subject. It appears to me there's a lot going on here, and we have not yet pinned it down. When we've pinned it down, then I think it's worth tabling, but until it's pinned down, I personally don't think it is worth tabling until we actually have it defined.
Chair, you're absolutely right. Can I suggest that members who have heard our dilemma here, that they give a bit of thought to it over the next week or so, and just email either Alistair or me with their suggestions. Then we'll be, when we meet as chairs and vice chairs, we'll be a little bit wiser.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Raz.
Thank you, Chair. The one another topic I'd like identified is the impact on the council when patients are discharged from hospital. Thank you.
We'll add that to the next Chair's meeting, impact from discharge, and of course that can also bring in things like good neighbour schemes and a variety of other things. So there we see we have resources that we can actually ask for evidence, we can actually get witnesses in. But I believe you're right, Councillor Rotten, we could do the same with transport. We just need to define which aspects. Councillor Rotten.
The other thing, I'm sorry, but the other thing, which I don't know whether you could just call for a report or whatever, but I don't know about other councillors, but I have never had so many emails about the problems with the new contract for the bin collection. I don't know whether it's just in my neck of the woods or where, but in the last, since the change to times, I have had so many. I'm beyond count. And I don't know whether we should ask for a report.
I think you're
right.
right.
I would say that Olive Affairs has been amazing, in trying to deal with the problem, but I just think there seems to be something wrong somewhere.
We agree something right now. I mean, we've had Serco, we looked at the new contract for Serco, so this committee, more than any other, was well informed on the basis of the Serco bid. The new rounds is a slightly separate issue. However, I believe that we have enough of us here today to actually ask for Olive Affairs to produce a report on the changeover to the new rounds, ready for the next Overview and Scrutiny Committee. He must be working on this already. He'll have his facts and figures. And I think we quite reasonably asked that query question. We'd like a report on what happened, what went wrong, and what's being done to sort it out. Does that meet with members' wishes? I think that's the best way of dealing with it, and I think you're absolutely correct. I know it's been frustrating, and some places have suffered more than others, but everyone's suffered to some extent, at least by confusion. So is that reasonable, Henriette? Can that be arranged? And I don't think there's any reason why it can't be done. Councillor Mellon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just in addition to that, I think it's not just the problem of the rounds, but the communication between the public and the council seems to have been a specific issue that people have complained to me about.
In fact, the sample things, the cards that were sent out showing one particular day, I had people telling me, oh, it's a Tuesday from now on. No, it's not Tuesday for everybody. That was just an example. But that, fortunately, was the example they saw on social media, and everybody assumed that we're all getting our bins done on the Tuesday. No, we're not. So that's a good point, if we can add that added in about the communication issues. Councillor Caston.
Could I also add that it's not just a communication issue, there's still people who aren't on any route at the moment to this day.
Really?
I think something needs to be looked at in how we've gone about that process of that changeover, and we seem to have left houses behind in the routes.
Can I suggest that if there's anything else that we haven't discussed or covered on what went wrong with the bins, that you just inform Henriette and she can ask Oliver to add it to the report, okay? But we will get a report, and what's more, we will expect it to be available for us for our September meeting, which, according to this agenda, is going to be held 19th of September at 9:30. There will be a 9 o'clock pre-meeting. Councillor Wellham, lucky man, will be in the chair. And oh, well, there we go. We'll have cake afterwards. We'll try and keep the meeting. And Councillor Wellham, I draw your attention to the red paper, which I forgot to read out of the first. I'm sure you won't let that happen to you. Thank you very much, members. See you some other time. Bye for now.